Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Iddo Kadim. Iddo is the Chief Technology Officer and Director of Olympic Technology at Intel, a company he spent nearly 3 decades with. As the Director of Olympic Technology, he helps drive improvements to the experience of all Olympic stakeholders. He draws from the innovation engines from across Intel to deliver this, and I look forward to hearing more about the methods he's used and the trends he's brought to life. Iddo, welcome to Technovation.
Hi, Peter. It's good to be here.
Wonderful. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. What a fascinating title to have, the Director of Olympic Technology, in addition to your CTO title. Talk a bit about your purview as the Director of Olympic Technology and how this role came about.
So, Intel has been a worldwide partner of the Olympic Games since 2017. And I basically manage all the technology dimensions of that in terms of integrating Intel technology and driving technology innovation from Intel into the Olympic movement at large and into Olympic and now Paralympic Games starting with Beijing. And it includes, the innovation, the execution, the implementation, the technical customer relationships, so to speak. So working with our Olympic and Paralympic stakeholders to understand their needs, and then identify the technologies and strategies at Intel that align well with those needs to satisfy them and create, wonderful experiences for all stakeholders involved.
Yeah, so interesting, Iddo. Among the many interesting aspects of this, I know you took on this role several years ago in preparation for the Olympic Games that just concluded, and those that were in Tokyo, of course. And I wonder, what is it like? This is a most unusual set of deliverables, if you will. You have an event that you're planning for that is multiple years out, and the date is non-negotiable. There's no delays. And moreover, the world will be watching. And so talk a little bit about, obviously, you've not always been in Olympic technology. You've had more traditional projects and portfolios that you've been managing. Talk a little bit about some of the unusual aspects of this sort of way of operating.
Well, I think one that's certainly, I took on this role a couple of years ago, actually, literally 2 years ago. And one of the big differences is that when you are developing a product, typically, we all shoot for schedules and we manage relentlessly to those schedules, but there's always some amount of give. And here, like you said, the games will go and they will go forward with you or without you, and people will adjust and figure out ways to deliver them. And if you want the technology to be integrated, you certainly need to be there. The Olympic movement itself puts, organizing committees, they put all sorts of buffers into the system by aiming to freeze technology well ahead of the games and move into testing mode. But there is that tension as well of, if you want to bring truly, cutting edge technology, how to do that. And it was a question of, in some cases, being impetuously fearless and rushing into an environment and making things happen and taking risks. And in some cases, not just before the games, but literally in a couple of cases before a race, where suddenly there's a hiccup and things aren't working, and figuring out how to still make them work for the race that's coming. But to the most part, it's really through a lot of coordination, traditional, engineering project, risk management, picking your battles, and also in some cases, acknowledging. I think one of the things that I discovered in Tokyo, I didn't quite understand that before, being truly part of the fabric of the games. That a lot of problems get solved on the ground in real time. And there's no, it's inevitable. You can only plan so far when it's such a huge and distributed event, and the goodwill, the desire of people to make great things happen, really the attraction of the passion around the Olympic movement and the Olympic Games helps make things happen that otherwise wouldn't.
Yeah, very interesting insights. I appreciate you sharing those, Iddo. You know, I wonder also over the course of a couple of years, the sorts of things that you might implement, let's say at the beginning of your tenure 2 years ago, the technology that was relevant, the methods that you might use, they themselves will evolve as time marshals on. So as 2020 became 2021, you may have weapons in your arsenal that become relevant for this. So I wonder, from a planning perspective, how things evolved, and even if you don't mind adding to that, what was your process of kind of understanding the needs of the various constituents you would be serving in order to determine what technology to bring to life?
Well, maybe I'll start from the end. We attempt to work closely with stakeholders, so functional area leaders in the organizing committees. We have a business development team that is located on the ground. We had a team in Tokyo. We have a team in Beijing. We have a team in Paris. That work with the organizing committees and try to get to know them as intimately as possible to identify the places where technology could play a role. We have an ongoing relationship, of course, with the International Olympic Committee and the different stakeholders within that, and very deeply with the Olympic Broadcasting Service, which are obviously a big users of technology and really appreciate innovation and try to drive innovation forward. We have been doing actually some really interesting projects with for Tokyo and even more so beyond. So one is just engagement and outreach and developing relationships, traditional partnership approaches, I suppose. From there, I think we try to map to our known roadmaps. In many cases, we have to work with existing technology and base solutions on that. And then as we get closer and we pick the opportunities to upgrade certain parts with the latest technology within the risk profile that a solution is willing to accept. So in some cases, if it really is going to affect things that are, it's a make or break type of thing, we probably would be a little more conservative. If it's something that is more of a value add and can take more risk, we'll be more aggressive. But we did in a couple of places, upgrade servers to higher performance servers, as an example. Or maybe in other cases, we didn't integrate new sensors because it would have been too disruptive to a certain application. Even though since the time we developed the architecture for a solution, we've developed it further outside of Olympics. And by games time, we weren't able to really catch up all of that because of the risk and complexity of integrating new stuff into an environment that really has to become very stable.
Yeah, very interesting. I want to get into some of the innovations that you and your team brought to life. One of the examples that I certainly recall from my own enjoyment of the games was the 3D athlete tracking technology, yes. And the ability to sort of track the competitors in ways that were new this Olympic Games relative to past ones. Can you talk a little bit about the technology behind that and how it came to life?
Yes, certainly. So 3D athlete tracking is a technology, the rare case where we developed a technology end-to-end within our group. In most cases, we partner with business units across Intel and external partners to put together solutions. In this case, it's something that is truly homegrown in startup mode. 3D athlete tracking is a solution that uses cameras with computer vision and AI to basically reconstruct the form and performance of athletes and enable us to analyze their performance in very fine-grained detail at the biomechanical level. This technology has a number of uses. What you may have seen, and many of your listeners may have seen as well during the broadcast of the sprint races in track and field were the heat maps. And so post-race analysis of the runners' speed progression through races with some incredible insights and stories about how races unfolded, even in the hurdles where you could see what happens when a hurdler gets too close to the hurdles or and loses speed or vice versa. So some really fascinating insights. So that's one representation of that technology. And another where we were able to take more advantage of the detailed data is in coaching and training of elite athletes. A partner of ours, Exos, used the technology while training NFL draft candidates in the spring, and this is just the beginning of, we hope, a new era of a new type of set of tools for athletes to develop their performance.
This brings about an interesting question, Iddo, in as much as you have multiple constituents you're serving. There, with regard to the Olympics themselves, of course, there are the people who are watching, and you described as I and many of the people who would be watching or listening to this will certainly remember the experience we had. But you also have the athletes in mind. Presumably, you have some of the broadcast networks and providing them this sort of information to help them, develop interesting storylines or provide interesting data back to the people watching the broadcasts again, among others. Talk a little bit about how you thought about the different constituent groups that you served and designed part of what you were doing for each of those.
So we certainly have in mind, several types of stakeholders. Athletes, for sure, both in terms of figuring out ways to help them develop their performance, but also improve their experience while in the games. For example, one of the issues in some previous games was the predictability of the transportation system. And so this is one of the ways that our Mobileye technology was used in our minds to help athletes be able to focus on their performance and help the organizers ensure that they get a predictable and safe transportation service. This leads me to the operators of the games, which are super important for us. The games are about sport, but there's so much more that happens at the end of the day. It's a mega event that is really a distributed smart city type of situation. So the operators of the games, both in terms of operating venues, but operating the whole infrastructure of the games, which connects us also to, one of the unique types of operators are the broadcasters. And so working very closely with them, and that leads us to, the fans that they serve. So also, with 3D athlete tracking, it wasn't just about putting together the technology to analyze the performance of athletes with cameras without worn, technology, only with cameras. But then it was also, what does it look like? What can the commentators say about this? What will they want to say that is at a level that would really enrich the experience of the viewers at home without confusing them? And how do the graphical design help them do that? So all of that were places where we had to really get involved and own. Which is first in my experience at Intel, usually we are behind the scenes working with partners on specific outcomes. And in this case, it was a complete ownership of a solution, including areas that typically we don't get a chance to get involved with.
That's really interesting. I appreciate you going through that. I wanted to ask you about Mobileye Technology, another area that you and your team have been focused on. Can you talk a bit about how it was applied? First, for those who may be less familiar, kind of a definition of it, how it was applied into the Olympics, and how you foresee potentially using it in the future as well?
So yes, of course, Mobileye is a subsidiary of Intel, which is focused on the transformation of vehicles, autonomous driving and assisted driving. The technology that we deployed for Tokyo 2020 was comprised of two main components. One are Mobileye's smart sensors. So these are basically super intelligent cameras that are installed in vehicles, in this case, in hundreds of the Olympic transportation system. And those cameras are basically sensors that learn a lot about the environment of the bus. It has two functions. One, to provide hints for safe driving for the driver in the vehicle, so the immediate value of that. But these sensors also have the ability to detect and identify objects beyond the ones that would impact the immediate safety of the vehicle, and also that may not even be directly on the road. So, for example, they're able to see pedestrians and identify the category of pedestrians or cyclists or whatever other vehicles or types of vehicles may be on or around the road, as well as a variety of potential hazards and developing hazards on the road. What Mobileye have done is they pull all of this data off of the sensors into a data platform and visualize multiple layers that can provide value to fleet managers, to city managers, to transportation managers, and so on. In this case, we provided these data layers about evolving road conditions to the Transportation Management Center to help them make real-time decisions in how to steer the buses and foresee issues that may evolve and maybe mitigate them, and by that help ensure, again, safe and timely transportation for the stakeholders that they were serving, athletes, other staffs, and so forth.
I think it's a great story you do. I love. I mean, what a blessing to have the full weight of Intel and all these different areas that innovations that the company is developing, and then to be able to dream up new applications for these in some really creative ways. That's a great example you gave. I also want to talk about. I know in our past conversations you talked a bit about the evolution of 5G. Technology and its importance in the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo. I know that was brought to life in partnership with some other companies also. Can you talk a bit about that evolution and how it was leveraged at the Olympics?
Sure. So first of all, Tokyo 2020 were the first Olympic Games, Olympic and Paralympic Games, really, that had full commercial 5G service that's already been launched and covered the full distribution of the games. If you go back to Pyeongchang in 2018, it was a trial. There were trial networks of 5G, but this is the first time that it was deployed already commercially. There are several use cases that we deployed. A few of them, of course, NTT, who were the network services sponsor of or partner of Tokyo 2020, were the key solution owners and delivered, and we supported them. One was an incredible, huge screen in the sailing venue. So really the purpose there was to bring the sailing competition out from sea and make it visible to people who were in the stands. Unfortunately, in Tokyo 2020, that meant only the insiders of the games who were there, athletes, federation folks, and so forth. But still, from a technology standpoint, huge screen stitched from multiple video streams that were collected by drones out at sea, stitched in very near real time onto a screen that was 50 meters by 6, if I remember correctly. So a huge screen that was floating on a barge next to the stand. So you could see the action at sea from afar, but you could also see, much closer, sort of a close-up of the race with live commentary, which was incredible. So this is one use of 5G to collect this data in real time and integrate it and present it. A huge amount of data, huge bandwidth requirements using a commercial network. Another one was a implementation of an augmented reality solution in the aquatic center. One of the challenges, and I think this is going to gain a lot of traction in the coming few years in sports and entertainment in general. today, if you want to get more data about what's going on the field of play, you have to shift your gaze from the field of play, either to your, to the phone to check what's, the internet, or to look at various, displays in the arena. If you can bring all of this content in front of you while you're still watching the field of play, in this case, the pool, there's tremendous value. If watching the pool and knowing who are the competitors, how are they doing, and so forth, is really an outstanding experience. And so this was, again, another use case for 5G, because this really requires real-time integration of content onto a live view, because you're looking at the competition, and whatever is being projected has to be synchronized with the actual placement of the swimmer in the pool. Yeah. And then lastly, we worked with the Olympic Broadcasting Service with OBS to enable 5G-based cameras. These were used in the new national stadium, both for track and field, but for the opening and closing ceremonies. And what's interesting about that in terms of the value is, one, it reduces tremendously the amount of physical infrastructure that is required to operate wireless cameras. And by that, also enable access for cameras into places and situations that previously were very difficult to access. So one great example that I saw was in the opening ceremony. I remember the Portuguese flag bearers bursting onto the field and dancing kind of wildly. And OBS were able to show them doing that all the way back into the tunnel during, as they were moving in the pipeline towards the field, and something they wouldn't have been able to cover before without this technology. And our goal with this is to lower the latency on this and really enable to capture real live sports with this technology, even starting in Beijing.
Fascinating. I want to also ask you about smart venue technology, something is adjacent to some of the things you've already covered as well. Talk a little bit about the way in which that was brought to life, and again, some of the broader implications or applications of it.
Yeah, I think smart venue is one of the places that are super important, especially now. I think even before COVID, but even more so with COVID. To manage venues, audiences in venues, enable safe presence to enable audiences to come to venues. This was already in plan from a physical security standpoint in Tokyo, but we were involved in deploying data collection systems. So using a variety of sensors in different locations to help the International Olympic Committee learn more about the actual utilization. And this is part of their mission to improve the efficiency and sustainability of Olympic Games. So learn the actuals of how various infrastructure is actually used, which is much more difficult to do if you're just sampling. It's very hard to know, or I guess I should say, it's very hard to do continuous measurement of use. You can only speculate. With technology, you can do continuous measurement of use. And this was planned as a data collection project for post-games analysis. But as we were deploying it, operators of these different spaces immediately jumped on the wagon and with us and wanted to get as much of this real time, because it could help them make decisions on, in the Olympic Village dining room, how quickly they're getting close to filling their capacity. And I should say their reduced capacity because of COVID. So they had to manage shifts and stuff like that. And they needed more real-time management tools. So that's one example. NEC deployed a very interesting accreditation validation system based on Intel technology, which I know they've now spread beyond that into airports and a variety of other places. So a lot of interesting crossover between innovation that happens for Olympic Games and then into the rest of the world. And of course, technology that is developed in other spaces and gets used in the Olympic Games.
Well, Iddo Kadim, congratulations on the great work you and your team have been doing. Thank you for this wonderful conversation, providing a bit of an overview of some of the innovative things that you've brought to life. It'll be a pleasure to see more of your team's work in place with future games, future Olympics and Paralympics to come. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you, Peter. A pleasure to have been here.